It was now day 4 of our tour, and we headed for Windermere in the county of Cumbria and the Lake District. This part of our journey was to take us from Haverthwaite in England to Glasgow in Scotland. We arrived at Haverthwaite early for a journey on the Lakeside and Haverthwaite Railway. We had expected to be travelling on a steam train, but when we arrived at the station, discovered a diesel car was on the run that morning. The old footbridge added a bit of good old English nostalgia to the scene. A few minutes later, we boarded the train and settled into our seats. I picked a spot near the driver's cabin. The signal was still in the up position, and the driver was waiting for the all clear to start moving. Soon we were on our way down the 3 miles of track through the Leven Valley, heading for the village of Lakeside. This rail link opened in 1868 and was closed 100 years later. It is now operated by the Lakeside and Haverthwaite Railway for excursions and tourism. Presently, through the trees, we had a glimpse of the end of Windermere. The term mere means lake, and this lake is the longest in England. It extends for a length of 10.5 miles and is said to have inspired many artists and poets in their creative works. Sitting in with the driver was his offsider, and as I spoke to him, I found him to be full of good humour and having a vivid imagination.
The second man.
Second in command?
Yes, that's it. So when I grow up, I can be a driver.
Fair enough. So what's the
I'm
second?
just waiting for a chance. But it's dead men's boots, you see, and I might be the first to see it through. So we're working on it. I mean, when I get really good at this job, they might let me learn to be a driver. But at the moment, I'm just acting as general helper.
So you got plenty of time. You got years ahead of you. Yet,
oh yes, I've got lots and lots of time. I'm counting on it. Otherwise, I might have to take early retirement. See if I think time's running out. But everything's fine.
Good.
You're enjoying yourself.
Just 14 minutes after leaving Haverthwaite, we pulled into the Lakeside station and wharf.
The weather was not in our favour that morning as we surveyed the mere from the wharf. The Lake District was discovered about 200 years ago by the wealthy classes who were the early tourists of that time. Men such as Wordsworth and De Quincey were among those who were inspired by the beauty of the area. A few minutes after our arrival, the train left to make the return journey to Haverthwaite. The boat we were to board had not yet arrived, and in the meantime we were attracted to a group of ducks scavenging for scraps of food dropped on the wharf. A solitary tern kept close watch nearby. Across from the wharf we could see the Lakeside Hotel, built of dry stone walling. No mortar is used to join the stones in place, and the wallers, as the tradesmen are called, need great skill and patience when fitting the stones in place. The wall at the entrance to the hotel was also built in dry stone, and the round post at the entrance was constructed in fine book leaf. half an hour after arriving at Lakeside, and we were headed out onto the lake.
We set out on the lake in heavily overcast conditions, which were not conducive to good photography. However, the water was flat and calm due to the absence of wind. Most of our attention was directed towards the eastern shore of the mere, and we headed for the village of Bowness, just 45 minutes away. Most of the time we braved the cold and damp atmosphere out on the top deck of the boat. Many fine houses from the latter years of the 19th century were built on the east shore for the wealthy businessmen of that era, and one could see how attractive it would be to live alongside of the lake in this hillside setting.
For a while we enjoyed the luxury and warmth inside the cabin of the launch, settling for a chat and a cup of tea as the landscape passed by. Presently we passed Storrs Hall, now a hotel. It was built in 1790 by Sir John Leggett and was acquired in 1806 by John Bolton, a Liverpool shipping merchant who amassed a substantial fortune by dealing in the West Indian slave trade. Storrs Temple was erected in 1804 to commemorate British victories of the Napoleonic Wars and was originally known as the Temple of Heroes. The shores here are beautifully wooded and have changed little over the centuries. Many walking paths afford a pleasant stroll along the eastern shore of the lake. Around a small headland we could see the other side of Storrs Hall. By 1811 this building was completely transformed into an elegant Georgian structure. We learnt that the surrounding hills rarely reached 1,000 feet in height, and as we got closer to Bowness, found an increasing amount of development and activity both alongside and on the lake.
It seems regattas were popular on Windermere in the 19th century, and sailing on the lake is no less popular today. The tradition continues, so we are told, and an annual lake festival is held in July. At the narrowest part of the lake, we sighted a car ferry, which continuously makes return trips across the lake, linking the road between the villages of Hawkshead and Kendal all the year round. To the west was Bell Island, Windermere's largest island, 3/4 of a mile long and inhabited with some breaks for over 700 years. It is said there was a Roman presence on the island at one time. The dwelling on the island was begun in 1774 and is reputed to be the first roundhouse built in England. It came under much adverse criticism at the time by the 18th century environmentalists. Today the fine trees partly screen the house, and it is said to be one of the most graceful residences on the shores of Windermere.
Requested to remain in their seats. Thank you.
"45 minutes after leaving Lakeside, we cruised into Bowness. In a document dated 1190, it is referred to as Bolinas, meaning Bull Headland. It is one of the oldest settlements on the shores of Windermere. The main industry here was fishing, but today tourism and sailing have become popular pastimes. As we alighted from the Miss Lakeland, two majestic white swans swimming in the harbour attracted our attention. Then it was off to the little village of Grasmere.
One hour later we arrived in Grasmere. We found this village rather picturesque and the footpaths rather narrow as we negotiated the main street in the village. It was here that William Wordsworth lived out the most creative years of his life, and the Wordsworth family are buried here in the St. Oswald's church grounds. We were able to pay a quick visit to the graveyard at the rear of the church to find this famous poet's grave. The concrete slab was well weathered over the years, and the inscription barely legible, but nonetheless recognisable. Grasmere has quite a good collection of shops, cottages and restaurants that attract the tourist trade.
We found this shop named Peter Rabbit and Friends, characters in Beatrix Potter's stories. Beatrix Potter, a well-known writer of children's books, wrote many of them here in this county. "20 minutes later, we were on the road again, heading for Gretna Green, just over the border into Scotland. Through the coach window we were able to view the rolling green Cumbrian hills and the miles of stone wall fencing and the stone houses as we passed by. The stone is known locally as scree and is the loose stone gathered from the hillside.
In the middle of the road. Now that just shows you.
We arrived at Gretna Green late that afternoon, and our tour group made straight for the tartan shop, which was nearby. The shop was very well stocked with all sorts of woolen gear, which was a welcome sight as the weather was cold and rather wet. There were many small dolls in traditional Scottish attire for souvenirs, and a display of large furry toys, too big to take on a tour coach. The display also included many porcelain and glass collectibles for sale. But most of our interest was in the warm clothing lines, particularly the woolen slippers and sheepskin rugs. A rack of fine tartan skirts attracted the ladies. And for the men there was a large collection of tartan ties to choose from. A large assortment of scarves were also for sale, and a sample of traditional Scottish dress was modelled on a shop dummy. These tartan rugs looked warm and inviting in this cold climate. At the front of the shop, the courtyard was neat and tidy, and several flower beds and statues adorned the area.
Across the courtyard from the tartan shop was the old blacksmith's shop of Gretna Green. Gretna Green has long been associated with the tradition of eloping couples seeking a hasty marriage. The wedding ceremony was usually performed by the blacksmith. However, in 1856, the law required that one of the contracting parties was to reside in Scotland for 3 weeks before the wedding. It seems, though, that these irregular marriages were eventually abolished on the 1st of July 1940.
Early next morning, we made a brief stop at Glasgow's George Square. Again, the day was very wet and overcast. Unfortunately, the square was barricaded as some building work was being carried out. However, we did get some video of a few of the many statues that adorned this whole area. After leaving the square, we drove to Glasgow Cathedral, also known as St Mungo's Cathedral. Glasgow Cathedral was one of the only cathedrals to escape destruction during the Scottish Reformation by simply embracing Protestant worship. The cathedral was built on the site of a chapel founded by the city's patron saint, St Mungo, a 6th century bishop of Strathclyde. The cathedral is an example of early English work, built in the form of a Latin cross with imperfect transepts. Records pertaining to the cathedral's early history were lost, but it seems it was sufficiently advanced in structure to have been dedicated in 1197.
Our coach captain fascinated us with a mythical tale relating to the symbols on these lampposts. All the stories concern St Mungo, the patron saint of Glasgow, a very holy man, and they go like this. The fish and the ring. The wife of the King of Strathclyde was having an affair with the captain of the guard. As a token of her love, she gave him a ring which had been a present from her husband. The king suspected some naughty business and had the ring taken off the captain at night while he slept and thrown into the River Clyde. Glasgow's on the Clyde. The king declared that there would be a big banquet and everyone must wear their most important jewellery. Oops! The queen asked the captain of the guard for the ring back, and when he said he had lost it, she became very cross and broke off their liaison. She then went to St Mungo and asked for his help to save her marriage. He went down to the Clyde and prayed for guidance, and a salmon leapt out of the river at his feet with the ring in its mouth. The day was saved, and everyone lived happily ever after. The tree. St Mungo was preaching in the fields with a great crowd around him. As the crowd increased, the ones at the back could not see or hear him, and became distressed. As he was speaking, a tree grew out of the ground under his feet and bore him up into the sky, so that he ended up sitting on the top of it, and everyone could see and hear him. The bird. A bird, possibly a sparrow, died near St Mungo's cell. Monks live in cells. And there was a nasty rumour put about that he had killed it. When he heard this, after all, sparrows drop dead all the time, he picked it up and warmed it and stroked it in his hands until it revived and flew away. There is also a bell on the square. This was given to Glasgow in the Middle Ages by the Pope of the day in recognition of its position as the holiest city in Scotland. Not anymore.
Near the cathedral we came across a statue of David Livingstone, Scotland's great missionary doctor and explorer. Livingstone made 3 journeys across Africa promoting commerce and Christianity. We then made a brief search of the graveyard for some more of Scotland's famous figures before returning to the coach. Situated in the cathedral precinct is the St Mungo Museum of Religious Life and Art, containing artefacts from all over the world. This new museum is reputed to be the first of its kind in the world.
It was now on to Pollock Country Park, just north of Glasgow, to view the Burrell collection. The gallery was built purposely to house this collection in 1983. The collection was presented to Glasgow in 1944, as Glasgow was the city of Burrell's birth and centre of his business activities. This spacious building was well lit by natural light from the many skylights and windows, which helped set off many of the artefacts on display, such as this famous Warwick vase, dating from the 2nd century AD, and found in the ruins of Emperor Hadrian's villa at Tivoli.
Sir William Burrell was a wealthy Glasgow shipowner, with a great passion for the collection of many forms of art. After his father's death in 1885, he and his brother took over the management of their merchant shipping business. Many stained and painted glass panels from the collection line the corridor leading from the entrance. During the First World War, most of the company's fleet was sold, and William devoted his life to the amassing of this fine collection.
We spent about 40 minutes in this building, viewing some of the hundreds of items on display. We were told that this collection is so large that there is not room for all of it to be displayed at any one time. It seems Sir William Burrell was endowed with excellent judgment and advice, which enabled him to put this outstanding collection together. The collection includes displays of high-quality European armour and weapons dating from the 13th to the 17th century. His collection covered almost every field of interest, and he was particularly keen on paintings and tapestries. Between 1911 and 1957, he kept detailed notes of his expenditure, which comprised more than 8,000 items, and his annual outlay averaged £20,000 during that period. It was late in the morning when we left the Burrell collection and headed for our next place of interest, which was to start with a cruise on Loch Lomond and be the opening scene of another video.